Hello and welcome to tonight's webinar where we're going to be talking about how to use the notes tool. I'm very excited about this webinar, and I'm doing these webinars on this channel to interact with people, but I'm also doing it just to have content for this channel. And I also want to tell you about a new project that I've been working on called PreacherPrep.com, and it is a website dedicated to helping pastors and really anybody use Logos Bible software. One of the differences between this and that is I'm uploading articles there, writing articles for that website. I'm also putting the content that we do in these videos up on the website, so it's kind of an exciting thing. And I'm doing subscriber only content, so if you would like to get content that I'm making just for those on the mailing list, go to PreacherPrep.com and sign up, and you'll get the weekly roundup. And this week I'm going to release, it's a 20-minute video on my favorite slimmed down passage guide. So I'm going to show you how to create the 9 things that I love in the passage guide. I've used this passage guide for a number of years, and it's slimmed down, but it saves me a lot of time and helps me study what I need to. All right, without further ado, let's get into how to use the notes tool. And this is going to be an overview of how to use notes. Maybe you're brand new to Logos, or you've never used the notes tool because you've been overwhelmed and you get confused between highlighting and notes, and what do? This video is for you. So I've got 10 things that I want to say about the notes tool to help you really work through it and to be able to use it within your workflow within using Logos Bible software. So the first thing that you need to know when you use the notes tool is that, and I'm going to open up the notes tool here, right there with that icon, and I'm going to search for notes. Notes is going to come up. I'm going to open up the notes tool. Notes and highlights all operate within the notes tool. They are essentially the same thing. And that is confusing when you first get into it, but it really opens up the way you're able to annotate notes, to use either a highlighting palette or icons within the text. And by the end of this video, you'll have some tools, no pun intended, but you'll have some tools with the note tool on how to set up a really personal study Bible. I'm going to show you my system that I used to set up all my notes that I take within the Bible, both commentaries, personal notes, all the things. So, but the notes and the highlights are basically the same thing, and you annotate your highlight. That means you can highlight a passage of scripture. You could highlight a little bit of text in a book, or a lot of text in a book, and then you're able to write notes on that highlight. So it's a pretty cool feature. So as you think about notes and highlights, think they all operate within the notes tool. A highlight is a note. A note that you make is a note. They all operate in the same sphere. So I've got the notes tool open up here, and that's the first thing we think of them the same, that notes and highlights are the same. Secondly, we want to create a note. And so there's several ways that we can create a note. One way is right here in the right-hand corner. You're able to make a new note. So I'm just going to click on it, new note, and it's going to open up a new note. And there's a lot of things going on right here, but for all intents and purposes, we have created a new note. Also, up here on the new note button, you hopefully see this little symbol right here. When I click on it, we can click a new note, and we can do it that way. And sometimes, depending on what you're doing, it will ask you if you want to create a new highlight or a new note. I'll show you that in just a second. But you can always choose just this new note, and it's going to open up a new note. The other way that you can create a new note is within what's known as your context menu. So I'm going to open up the Bible, and when I've got the Bible open, what I can do, there we go, that's the Bible. If it wants to open up, there we go, we've got the Bible open now. You can always take some text, highlight it, do whatever you want to do, right click, and this will work for a Bible, a book in your library, whatever it is. You can right click on it. This is called the context menu. And when I've got one of these things up top, so whether it's the reference of Luke 15, 11 through 16, or the selection, which means I've selected that text. So I'm not thinking of just the reference, I'm thinking of the selection of that text. Over here on the right hand side, it's going to ask you if you want to add a note. And if you have notebooks set up, it's going to give you some options of your most recently used notebooks that you can send that note to. So I don't want to send it to a notebook yet. I'll show you how to do that in just a second. I just want to make a note. So I'm going to add a note, and notice what happens. It anchors the note to this text. And so this is Luke 15, 11 through 16. It's got the text here, and this is where you can type whatever you want into your note. But it is essentially anchored, which means it's connected and linked to that text when I do a new note from the context menu when it's on the selection option. If I right click on this and do the reference option, so now I'm not thinking of the surface text, I'm thinking of that reference, Luke 15, 11 through 16, and I go down here and I click to add a new note. Look at that anchor. Instead of having all the text, because that's what the selection does, when I go here, it's now anchored to those verses, and that operates a little bit differently in anchoring to a verse versus anchoring it to the selection. But that's how you create a note, and you open up a note is by in the context menu. So you can do, again, new note up here. You can select text, right click on it, choose one of these options at the top, and then add a note, and that's going to open up a note. The other thing you can do is just click the letter N. So if I've got this, you won't be able to see on my keyboard, but if I've got this selected here and I click N, oh, excuse me, I need to make sure this panel is chosen. I click N. That's not what I want to do either. Let me select some more text again. Like that, and I click N. It's going to open up a new note. It's going to have it anchored to the text that I've selected, the selection, not the actual reference, and then you can make your note. So those are the three ways. New note up here, context menu by right-clicking in, this is going to work in your Bible or any book in your library, or you can click the letter N when you have something highlighted. It's going to create a new note. So now that we've created a new note, I want to talk about anchoring, and anchoring is this information right here. And anchoring in notes is a way of saying, what is this note anchored to, or what is this note connected to? Is it connected to a Bible verse? Is it connected to a head word within a dictionary? Is it connected to a little bit of text in a book? What is this note connected to? It doesn't have to be connected to anything. It could just be, now we have a blank note that doesn't have anything into it, and it's not connected to anything. Or we can say, I want to connect that to a text. And there's several ways that you can do that. One is like what we just did when we have text selected, and then we, in the context menu, we create a new note. Or we can go here to this section right here, these three dots within the note, and we want to add an anchor, and then it's going to ask us, what do we want to do? Do we want to take the selected text, which is this selected text that we've had selected in our Bible? So when we say done, we click done, and now Luke 15:14, because notice that's Luke 15:14 is in the panel. That is, it's anchored to that text. So Logos is saying this note is now connected to that text, and we're able to write information in this note that's going to be connected to that text. So we could say a severe famine would be difficult. Quite the understatement, but Luke 15, when it says about the prodigal son, a severe famine occurred in that country, we could say a severe famine would be difficult. We've got this note, and it's anchored to that text, but now let's say that we want to make it show up somehow within this text. Well, this is where highlighting and icons come into play. Up here in the left-hand side of this section, where it's got these two like stop sign icons, on the left-hand side, these are your note icons, and it's a little bit limited. But what you get to do is you get to choose what icon, what graphic, what icon you want to use, and then what color of that icon. So we could say, I want this to be in the cross, and I want this to be black, and then notice what's over here. That cross in black is going to show up on that verse because it's anchored to that text. This is going to work in your Bible. It's also going to work in books. So let me actually pull up. I'm going to pull up a book. I'm going to pull up the Faith Life Study Bible. And we don't have 1514. So let me actually see if I can go to the ESV or another that might have anything. Nothing has anything on 14. That's okay. We'll just be able to use this. Let's say though I want to add this bit of text to this so that the cross will show up there. When I go to add anchor, selected text, because this is selected right there, it's got ESV Study Bible. We're going to want to make sure that that visual filter is on. Yeah, visual filter is on. Make sure it's connected up here. And that, for some reason, is not wanting to work right now. That is a versified resource, so that should be working. I'll have to check that out. Let me try it a little bit different way. Let's say we want to add an anchor to Luke 15:15. And I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to have to check that out. That should show up unless that is not a versified resource. So, but right here, look, Luke 15:15, right there, that cross. And any time that we change it, we can change it to a heart. It's automatically going to show up as a heart. If we want to add this link icon, and then we can change the color, and it's going to automatically change within the resource. So you can anchor text to your Bibles, to resources, whatever it is. In fact, let me pull open a book, and we will make this work. So I'm just going to pull up a non-commentary so it can be seen, and we will just do Acts of the Holy Spirit. Here we go. I've got this book, and I want to take this, add the anchor, selected text, and there it works. Okay, so it must not be working in that book right now, but it's working in this one. Do you see how it has this icon? It's because we've anchored it to that text by just grabbing some of this text and then going to the add anchor right there. And then if I want to update that icon, I can go here and say, hey, I want it as this in red, and then it's going to change that icon. And it's in both places. It is in this book because it's anchored here. It's also in the New American Standard Bible right there. So it's anchored to two spots, that verse and that selection in the text, and we can get rid of those anchors. But that is how anchors work. You're able to anchor it to multiple places. This is very helpful when you're thinking about parallel passages or you're making a note on multiple verses within the Bible. This is how it gets done. This is a really great feature to make one note, and it's going to show up in all sorts of different places. But you don't just have to use the icons. You can use highlighting, and this is a pretty cool feature too. So Logos comes pre-programmed with a bunch of different highlighting palettes and schemes that you can use. So let's say I want to anchor this text. I want to anchor this note. I'm going to add an anchor, and I'm going to do the same thing. Luke 15:14. I'm going to click OK, and now this text is anchored. This note is anchored to this text. We could add an icon, but let's say we want to highlight it, and I want to do it in a green highlight like that. Everybody see that right there? Green highlight. Look at that. It goes to a green highlighting palette on the text itself on Luke 15:14. So you're able to have either an icon, a highlight, or both. And let's add another reference. I'm just going to choose John 3:16 to show you that this works without you having to be in your Bible. So I'm going to click done, John 3:16. So this text, this note is anchored to these two passages. Then when I go to John 3:16, it automatically shows up in that palette. So that is pretty cool. So when you're able to anchor a note to a text or a verse, you're able to choose whether you want an icon or whether you want a Bible verse. Now, you can anchor it to several things. You can anchor it to a Bible verse, like one Bible verse, Luke 15:14. You're able to anchor it to multiple Bible verses, so Luke 15:14, John 3:16. If you have a theme that you're working on a note and you're writing in that note all sorts of different information about those verses, you can connect all those verses in one note. That's what the anchoring does. You can also do the same thing with books. So you can anchor it to different books by adding the selected text. You're also able to add notes to headwords. So let me show you what this means. A headword is usually shows up most prominently in your dictionaries and encyclopedias. I'm going to open up the Anchor Yale Bible Dictionary, and I've got this word. This is an entry in this dictionary, eschatology. I'm going to right click on it, and notice in this selection menu on the left hand side we have a new option. We have eschatology as a topic, but also headword, eschatology, right there, headword, eschatology. Now I want to add a note, and I'm just going to create a note. That's going to be the anchor to that eschatology and for that headword. And I'm going to type in eschatology means coming things. And so right there, I've got that that note in there. And then let's say I want to add a note. I'm going to add a red note like that. So now I know I have a note. So when I hover my cursor over that that icon, it's going to show up what I've written in that note. Pretty cool feature. But look what happens when I go to a different resource that has that headword, eschatology. And when I click on that, it's going to go to the, let me turn that fact book off. When I've got that note there, it's going to let me know that that note is good in all my resources that have the headword of eschatology. So let's go to a different resource, eschatology, same thing right there. Let me turn the fact book off so we can really see it. Eschatology means coming things. So you're able to quickly anchor a text to a headword in a dictionary, encyclopedia, verses, or monographs, books that you've got, and you can anchor a note to multiple places, and then within that note you can have the icon or the highlighting, whatever you would like. And so now what you can do, you can't create custom icons, but you can create custom highlighting palettes. And to do that, you're going to want to open up your highlighting tool. This means, so this is in the tool section, and I've got highlighting right there. I'm going to click on highlighting. This means that you're able to create a new palette and customize your highlighting. So you could have, like, Logos is going to come pre-made with some highlighting palette, but I've got one for personal Bible study that I've made. I've got one for ordination, going through the ordination process. I've got for laws of the Bible, stations of the cross. I've got book highlights. This is one I made, and these are all different highlights that I use within the book. And sometimes they show up as a highlight. Sometimes they show up. Highlight doesn't just mean it's going to be like yellow or red or orange or green. It has all sorts of different things that you can use within the highlighting palette for that anchor. And so let me show you how this works. I'm going to open up a book. We're going to open up Grant Osborne's commentary set. And I think I've got another video about highlighting palette, and if not, I'm going to make one. But I've got my books highlight right here, and look at what I can do. I can grab some text like this, and then come over here to my highlighting palette and say point 1, and look at what that does. That matches the highlighting palette, and not only that, but it creates this note with that anchored text that has, when I scroll down to the book highlights, so everybody can kind of see the book highlights section is the same as the book highlights over here. It's under point 1. And so we could do the same thing. I'm going to come here, and I'm just grabbing this text as an example. I'm going to come here to point 2, And look what happens over in the text. We have point 1, point 2, and it created another note because we created a highlight on that note, because highlights and notes are the same thing. So you can create custom highlights by going up here to New Palette, and then right down here you can name it whatever you want. Logos Bible Study Software Training. And now that we've got that, we can come in here and we can add a new style. And this is where you get to play around. We're not going to spend time in here, but this is where you get to play around and create your highlighting preference for that highlighting palette. It is very customizable, but that's how you're able to have your custom highlights in colors, with words, with like the 1 here and the 2 here. Very powerful stuff. But the reason it's doing that is because the note is anchored to that text. That's the big thing to remember. The note is anchored to that text. Now, I want to get rid of these highlights, delete these notes, because I have no use for them. There's 2 ways that you can delete notes. One is right here with the 3 dots, delete note. You can also choose notes together. So I'm going to choose this note, hit shift, and then select that note, and now I've got these notes together. A whole lot of information about those notes, but I want to delete these selected notes. That means I'm going to delete them together, and they're gone. When you select multiple notes like that, you're able to update the highlight for all the notes. You're able to update the icons for all the notes. You're also able to update where that note is stored within the notebook, which notebook. So, which is what I want to talk about now is notebook. So a note really belongs in a notebook. And on the left-hand side here of this menu, this is our filter menu and our notebook menu. On the notebook menu, this is where you get to store your notes. And it is easy to get complicated. I've got not too many notebooks. A lot of people will have like 1 notebook per book of the Bible, but I prefer not to. I've just got a note for Bible notes, a notebook for Bible notes. I've got a note for this week's sermon. I've got a note for prayers and liturgy and illustrations and daily journal. And so I keep it pretty simple, because in the filter menu, when we add information to the note, whether it's a highlight to a book, it's going to show up in this resource option here. It's going to give you the option between highlights and notes. But right here, when you anchor it to a book of the Bible, it's going to automatically offer you this option to filter out based on Bible book. So I can have all my notes on 1 Kings right there. And so I'm less likely to have like a notebook, or recommend having a notebook per book of the Bible. But if I anchor it to a text, then it's going to automatically show up in the filter list on the left-hand side. And there's all sorts of different things. So you can, that you have the resource, where is the note connected to, what's it anchored to? If it's anchored to a biblical text, what book of the Bible? You can tag information. I'll show you tagging here in just a minute. And then also notebook. That's what I want to talk about now, is the notebook. So every note should really be stored in one of these notebooks, and you can create your notebooks like you want to. And I'm going to create one right here with the plus sign, and I'm going to say LBST for Logos Bible Software Training. And now I've got a notebook called LBST, and as you can see, it's got nothing in it. And notice when I click on that, it's because it's up here, notebook LBST. When I get rid of that, now I've got, these are all my notes, close to 3,000 notes. This one, the one that we made tonight, eschatology means coming things or future things, the future. Right here is where we're able to set that into a notebook. So when I go to set notebook, I'm going to scroll down and look for the LBST right there. And when I go back to the LBST notebook, does everybody see that on the left-hand side? When I click on that, that note is now in that notebook. So you're able to store and move notes in notebooks that make them easier to find. And when you use a combination of the notebooks, tags, which is what I'm going to talk about next, and this filter menu, you're able to easily see what notes you have. One of the complaints sometimes people have about the note system is they feel like they want Evernote or Notion, where you can have nested notebooks. This system of using one notebook and letting it the anchors and the tags, which is what I'm going to show you next. When you have those two things, you're able to basically have nested notebooks. They're just not visually nested, but you're actually able to have better access because those notes can show up in different places. They can show up in one places for tags. They can show up for one places for the reference where it's anchored to. And if you had them all into a like a nested notebook system like Evernote, they would not, in my opinion, they would not be as productive to search. So let me show you how to add tags, because that's one of the things you can tag these notes. And I'm going to show you right here where I've got in my filter list tags preaching. These are all my notes that I have tagged as preaching. And like when I click on this one, 7 sermons in Acts, look at what notebook it's in, Bible notes. But I still know this is about preaching. Or come down here, this is in illustrations and quotations, and it's on preaching. It's illustration. It's not in my Bible notebook, but I know it's about preaching. So how do you add a tag? Well, let's go back to the note eschatology, and I'm going to add the tag eschatology, and then it's tagged. That's it. And it's going to show up in your filter list. We can also, so you can see it, I'm going to add preaching. So now it's tagged eschatology and preaching right there at the bottom. When I go to tags and I look at preaching, look at what note is there. It's tagged preaching and eschatology. To get rid of a tag, there's a little X to clear it next to both tags. I'm going to get rid of that. And then notice that note is gone because we're not looking at preaching. We're only looking at preaching tags right now. So you can tag a note, which makes it very, very helpful. Now, to find those tags, you're able to find them in 2 different places. One we've already talked about over here on the left-hand side. You're able to, and this menu is going to update when you choose a notebook, when you choose a book of the Bible, a reference, whatever it is. These options are going to change depending on how you filter out the resources. But let's say I want to see all of my notes with preaching. I can click on that, the preaching tag, and then notice this menu does change. So I have much less Bible books, much less references. I've got my notebooks there that have this information. You're also able to find this information in a search panel. So when I open up search panel, I'm going to want to make sure I'm on the docs. And I know this is a lot of information. That's why I put these in video form so that you can go back and watch it and get refreshed. But I'm going to search for, it's pretty easy, my tag, preaching. And then we've got those tags. So it's saying 118 results in 4 documents. And I will have to go figure out why we've got 118 here and 116 in the menu. I have to do a little bit of work, but these are all notes that I've tagged with the tag as preaching. So you're able in your search panel, docs, my tag, whatever the tag is, you're going to get a list. And so this is a great way to search and find out, and you're able to see what notebook it's going to be in. And so that's how you're able to search the my tag, and then the tag. As I've talked about, you can filter notes over here on the left-hand side with just all the different things. So like a text range, whether it's a book highlight, a Bible note, which notebook it's in. You can come here and actually choose the notebook. But whether it's, these are all my notes. These are, and back here, These are all my different highlights. And so you're able to quickly filter out what kind of resources that you want within the filter menu. Now, you can search through tags. I want to show you how to search through your highlights. This is pretty cool because you're able to, when you highlight something, you're able to search through those highlights and get the information that you want. You're able to search by keyword. You're able to search in your different highlight palettes. And so we've got some options to look at. So the first way that we can do it is right here in our note tool. We're able to see all of our different highlights as you'd want to, and you'll get all your different notes. You can also go to your books or Bible, depending on where the highlight's at. But for us, we're going to look at the book section, and we've got options up here: all books, all text. The all text option is where your different highlighting palettes are going to show up. So I've got a book highlight that I call agree. So these are highlights that I make that I agree with. Look at what I'm going to do. So I'm searching all my books with the highlight palette of agree. I'm just going to search the word baptism. And then Logos brings back every time I've used that highlight, that word baptism within a highlight. So you're quickly able to search through your highlighting palettes by coming to this all text section on a books panel and make sure that it is agree within the books highlight. You can also search all the different highlights within an option. You could have all these chosen, but that is how you're able to search through a highlighting palette. You can also you can type this out. So I could do baptism. So I'm going to search the word baptism in, then I'm going to type highlight, and notice when I scroll down what Logos does. If you don't know this, you might not pick up on it, or you might not think to scroll down, but it says highlight keyword. When I select that or just type colon, so baptism in highlight, it's asking which highlighting palette do I want to use to search this word. So let's say I want to search under my books highlight agree. Same option as going to this all text and clicking there with the agree. And for those of us who like search panels, this is a great way to search through that information. Baptism in highlight under my agree highlights. And then the other way that you can search highlights is, I'm going to open up this text, and we have this panel here. You can find this through the information panel. And I'm going to make sure that everything is good. And when I click on this, so I've clicked on one of these words within this panel that is highlighted. Notice in the information panel, we have highlights right there. Book highlights, agree. When I click on one of these, it's going to do an inline search, which means now I'm looking for all the same highlighting palette within that resource. Very, very powerful. You may have to pause it and think through what that means. But basically, when I use the information tool, if I've got a highlighting palette in a resource that I use a lot, I can open up the information tool, click on like this agree. It's going to do an inline search, which means it's searching through that resource for all those different highlights. Very, very powerful, and a quick way to pull up your information. So we are coming up. We're going 40 minutes. I want to share with you quickly about my kind of personal study Bible, because you may be overwhelmed with notes and note taking and all the different things. And so I want to show you my Bible, and right there. And I've got these little icons right here, a yellow one and a blue one. And let me go to Luke 15, because that's what I'm working on this week. I've got this yellow with an X. There are elaborate highlighting palettes that are out there, and what's beautiful about this system is you can customize it to make it how you want to use it. The challenging thing about that is it can get overwhelming for all those choices. So I keep it pretty simple when it comes to using the highlighting palette. For me, if it's yellow, and I don't use a lot of highlighting in the Bible, I mostly use icons. But you could do the same thing with your highlighting scheme within a Bible or a book. If it's got a yellow note, these to me are information that I've written. So I'm not copying pasting. I'm not getting it from another resource. These are things that come to mind for me. And then when I've got this yellow in an X, these are usually like sermon notes or sermon preparation, because I keep a notebook called This Week's Sermon, and I always have a note that is anchored to the text. And I'm not preaching right now, but I'm preparing for a Sunday school lesson. And so it's Luke 15, 1 through 32, the three parables, the lost sheep, coin, and son. And this is where I begin to work on my sermon before I go to like the sermon builder and write out my sermon. But I always keep this X with a yellow circle, because I've got a notebook called Sermon Outlines and Series Ideas. And I throw all those sermon outlines in that notebook, because what that means is when I'm in like the Bible and I'm looking at my notes, if I see one of these X's in a circle, yellow circle, I know, oh, that's an outline. I can quickly go there, and I'm going to have more in-depth information because I'm putting more information in that note than I am other notes. So that's one of the differences for me. You can come up with a system that works for you, but I've got yellow is mine. Green is always someone else's work. And these are kind of arbitrary. There's just no right or reason. It's just the way that I've chosen to do it. But green are commentaries or monographs. I copy and paste information, and notice I've got it in this week's sermon notebook. I've got a green square icon. I don't use a lot of different icons. I'd get confused as to what they are. And then I've got the information pasted within that text. But when I see green, I know that's somebody else's thoughts. I've also got, let's see, it may be hard to find one. Let's go to Psalms. It may be a little hard to find one because I'm going to need to find a journal entry, which are blue for me, and I don't want to open up my journal notebook because I don't want anyone to see what's in there. But the same thing, so yellow is my work, green is a commentary. If I see a blue note, that is my journal, and I've got a notebook. I'm not going to open it up, but daily journal. I don't use it all the time. I need to rename it from daily journal to times in my life when I've needed to journal. But I've got those, and I've got them anchored to the text, and they show up in a blue note. And then the fourth kind of note that I use, let me go to Jude, because this is a good example. I do use this sometimes. I've got this link icon, but it's in red. If it's in red, that means word study. So I'm not anchoring to the text. I'm anchoring to that word within that text. And let me open that one up. And then I've got it anchored. Like, this is a good example of how to put everything into practice. So it's in my Bible notes tag. It's tagged as doulos because that's the word that I'm thinking about right here. I've got this icon in red, which means it's linked to other things. So I've got all these different options. I've got it linked in here to a word study, or it's the theological lexicon of the New Testament. I've got this definition right there. And then I've got from the charts tool, the graphic that I put in there. But if I see red, I know immediately, oh, this is going to be word study. And then the final way that I think about notes is when it is purple, it is illustrations or quotes. And let me go to that notebook so you can see it in action, because it may, I'm slowly building this one up. It's not huge yet. But this is when I've got a purple, for me is always going to be an illustration or a quote. When it's a quote, I use this like think bubble, and this is a quote. If it's an illustration, I use that's a bad example. Oh, I had those backwards. If it's a thought bubble, that's an illustration. If it is a quote, I use the star. But they're both the point. They're both purple. Is the point? I could actually just make them into a regular purple box, make it purple, anchor it to the text, and I would be good to go. But that's my system: is yellow mine, green for someone else's work, blue for personal journal, red notes for word study, and then if it's purple, that's going to be an illustration or a quote. I would love to hear how you're using notes and tool. If you have a palette, I just love to talk about Logos Bible software. This is a passion project for me, to be able to talk and train others how to use Logos. So we've gone 45 minutes. I want to begin to wrap it up. I want to thank everybody who's watched this, the few that have watched it tonight, but also after the fact. I imagine we'll get quite a few after the fact who want to watch this. And I want to encourage you go to PreacherPrep.com. Sign up for our weekly roundup newsletter. That's a website I put together where I'm putting a lot of my content, not just videos. These videos are going on there, but also articles. But this week in the subscriber newsletter, I'm going to send out a free 20-minute training on my custom slim down passage guide. These are the 9 tools. This is not a passage guide I made for a video. I have used this passage guide for a number of years, and it makes quick work of the things that are important to me. And so it's going to show you how to put a passage guide together. It's also going to show you a slimmed down version of a passage guide that I think you might find helpful. So if you want to receive that, I'm not going to put it on the website. I'm not going to put it on the channel. But if you want to receive that, go to PreacherPrep.com and sign up for the newsletter, and you'll be able to, I'm going to send those out every Friday with Logos information, training, subscriber-only information, all the different things. Go to the website, sign up, and I'll be able to hopefully help you as you study God's Word. Hope this has been helpful to you, and until next time.